The first time I heard his voice, I thought I was losing my mind. Then he saved my life and called me his mate. Part 1, The First Whisper. My name is Lena Calloway. I'm 26, a junior archivist at the city's Historical Records Department, and was the least remarkable person I knew. I cataloged forgotten things for a living. Old land deeds, undelivered letters, birth certificates of people whose entire bloodlines had since vanished. I was good at my job because I had no difficulty accepting that most things simply disappeared without explanation. I should have remembered that when the voice started. It was a Tuesday in October. I was standing in my kitchen making instant noodles at 11:30 at night, still in my work clothes. When the voice said, "Don't, one word, male, low, close enough that I spun around expecting someone directly behind me. The kitchen was empty, the apartment was locked. I told myself it was stress. 60-hour weeks. No sleep. I ate my noodles and went to bed and tried very hard to forget the way the voice had sounded, like it came from inside the room. Like it came from inside me. 3 days later, I was cutting through Hallett Park when I heard it again between songs on my headphones. Stop walking. My feet stopped before my brain gave the instruction. 3 seconds later, a cyclist came barreling around the bend, no lights, no bell, going 20 miles an hour on the footpath. He missed me by a breath. If I'd taken one more step, he'd have hit me head on. I stood on the path for a long time, heart hammering. "You're welcome," the voice said. This time I didn't spin around. I just stood still in the falling leaves and whispered, "Who are you?" Nothing. He was already gone. I kept a notebook. Every warning, every time, every word. By the end of October I had 11 entries. He warned me away from a stove burner that had somehow switched on. Away from falling construction debris once. At 2 in the morning when I'd been crying for 3 hours without knowing why. He said very quietly, "Eat something." That one broke me a little, because warnings about cyclists were one thing, but that felt like watching, like caring. Like someone who knew me well enough to notice I hadn't eaten in 30 hours even when I hadn't. Notice myself. I started talking back, not expecting answers, just talking, the way you talk to a photograph of someone you've lost, knowing the silence isn't absence but simply a different kind of presence. He started answering. "What are you reading?" he asked one afternoon in the archive room. While I was alone with a century-old land grant and the buzzing fluorescent light. "A family called Voss," I whispered. "They owned 400 acres of what's now the north part of the city. There's a photograph, the whole family in front of their farmhouse. The mother's expression looks like she's already grieving something she hasn't lost yet." A pause. "Then, that's the bravest kind of love. The kind that knows what it costs and does it anyway." I set down the document. "Who are you?" "My name is Calum," he said. "It means sky," and something in how he said it, compressed, like an entire sentence folded into one word, told me that sky meant something specific to him, that it meant the thing I no longer have. Part 2. The voice grows stronger. He knew things he shouldn't. He knew my mother had died when I was 9. That I kept her photograph in my coat pocket because I needed her close when it was cold. That I alphabetized my books by emotion, grief shelved separately from sadness, something like hope taking up only half a shelf but growing. He knew I hadn't cried at my mother's funeral and had been terrified by this for 17 years. "How do you know all of this?" I asked one night. "Because you know it," he said. "The connection between us runs deeper than words. Lena, I don't read your thoughts. I feel the shape of them." The weight. What connection? He was quiet for a moment. "Then, in my world, there are those born with a matched counterpart. A person whose soul occupies the same frequency as yours. The bond forms when you find them. It connects everything, body, mind, spirit. It's called a mate bond." My chest did something involuntary. A kind of turning toward, like a compass finding north. "And you're saying we have one," I said. "I'm saying the bond found us. I don't know which of us it started with. But yes. You are mine, Lena. And I am yours." That is not a claim or a possession, it is simply what is true. The way north is true. Then where are you? I said. If this bond is real, why can't I see you? Touch you? Why are you only a voice? The silence this time was longer. And heavier. Because I am not in your world, he said finally. Yours and mine exist in layers, like pages of a book pressed together. Most people live on one page their entire lives and never know the others exist. But there are places where the page is thin, where a person can push through. If they know how and you pushed through, I was pushed, his voice hardened slightly. Just for a moment, 3 years ago, someone with enough power and enough reason to want me gone forced me into the space between the layers. Not into your world, not back to mine, into the between place. 3 years, I repeated, you've been trapped for 3 years. The between place is not designed for living things. I have been coming apart slowly. The mate bond was the only stable thing. When it connected our minds instead of our bodies, it gave me something to hold on to. I pressed my hand to my sternum. The warmth that lived there, the one I'd stopped questioning, the one that had no source, pulsed gently under my palm. His warmth. His anger got me. Who pushed you? I asked. A man named Dorian Vale, he said. He wanted my territory. My people. He knew the mate bond was the only thing that could fully unseat him once I claimed it. A bonded alpha cannot be challenged. So he moved first. Before I found you. He didn't know about me, no. The bond had not yet manifested between us. He thought removing me removed the threat. He was wrong, I said. He was wrong, Calum agreed. And in his voice was something I hadn't heard before, not warmth, not grief, something fierce and patient. Like a fire that has been banked for a long time and has not gone out. Part 3. What he didn't tell me. The vision started in November. Not dreams, I was awake for all of them, which made them impossible to dismiss. I'd be at the copy machine or waiting for the kettle and suddenly I was elsewhere. Overlaid with another place like to photographs printed on the same film. Forests with silver bark and blue-green leaves. A stone stronghold full of warmth and voices, a man's hands, strong, scarred, a crescent moon scar across the left knuckle. Working at something I couldn't identify, and grief. Not the grief of death but the grief of a locked door, of being sealed inside a room while the world continued without you. I was living with his memories. Carrying them the way I carried my mother's photograph, not mine, but necessary clothes. And then in December I started losing time. Small gaps first. 5 minutes. 10. I'd look up from a book to find I was 3 pages further than I remembered. I'd start making tea and find it already finished. Then I lost 2 hours. I came back to myself at my kitchen table at 11:47 p.m. The last thing I remembered was sitting down to eat at 9:30. The dishes were washed. The leftovers were packed into containers in the fridge in a way I never packed them. Neat. Labeled, the lids properly sealed. I stared at those containers for a very long time. Calum, I said. My voice was flat and quiet and careful. The way you speak when you already know the answer and are giving someone the chance to tell the truth before you have to drag it out of them. What is happening to me? Lena, don't say my name like that. Like you're softening something, tell me. A long pause. The longest he'd ever taken. The mate bond, he said carefully, runs both directions. As it has strengthened, it has begun to allow me to do something I couldn't do in the beginning. When you're very relaxed, in the space between waking and sleeping, or fully absorbed in something, the bond widens. And I can move through it. Into your mind. And from your mind into my body, I said. The silence confirmed it. How many times? 11. 11, the dishes, the tea, the mud on my feet one morning and the window unlatched in a way I never left it. What were you doing? I asked, with my body. What were you doing with me? Walking, he said. Just walking. through the city, feeling the cold, the pavement. Once I stood under a tree in the park and felt the bark for a long time. I know how that sounds. I know what I am telling you this. But Lena, I had forgotten what it felt like to be physical. To be real. The between place strips that from you slowly, until you can't remember if you ever had a body at all. And I couldn't not. You couldn't not use me without my knowledge, I said, yes, no deflection, no justification, just the word bare and honest. That was wrong, I know that was wrong. Were you ever going to tell me? The pause was its own answer. I see, I said. I was afraid, he said quietly. Not of your anger. Of losing this. Of losing you. You are the only real thing I have, Lena. You are all I have. And his voice fractured, just slightly, a crack in something that had been held together by will for a very long time. I was a coward. I chose my fear over your right to know. And I am sorry. I sat with the packed leftovers and the washed dishes and the evidence of 11 nights when someone else had been living in my skin. I thought about what it would feel like to be dissolving. To be coming apart in a space between worlds with nothing to hold onto but a bond to a woman who didn't even know you were real. To feel what a body felt like, briefly, walking through a cold city at midnight, and to have that be the most alive you'd felt in 3 years. I didn't forgive him yet. But I understood him. And those are different things that can exist at the same time. Part 4. The choice. I didn't speak to him for 3 days. On the 4th day I went to the archive and pulled the Voss file, spread the land grant on the table, put the photograph beside it. The blurred family, the mother with her preemptive grief. I had spent 5 years cataloging the remains of people who had no idea they would become records. Who had loved each other in full life and been reduced to documents. The matriarch in the photograph had known something the rest of her family hadn't. You could see it in her posture, in the set of her mouth. She'd known how briefly any of us get to be present, embodied, tangible, accounted for, before we become history. She'd been trying to hold the moment. To feel it before it was over. Calum, I said. I felt him go still. Present. Not daring anything. I'm not okay with what you did, I said. I know. Using my body without my consent, even for something innocent, is something I'm going to need real time with. That's not negotiable. I understand. But I also need you to understand that when you told me, what I felt wasn't only anger. I touched the edge of the old photograph. I felt something confirmed. That you were real. That this was real. That you needed something I was uniquely positioned to give. And that my throat tightened. That I was not willing to pretend I didn't feel that. Lena, my name in his voice, quiet as a held breath. There's a researcher, I said. Marsh. He wrote his dissertation 30 years ago. It's filed under theoretical geography, which is how academics say the impossible without getting fired. He studied liminal spaces. Thin places. The points where your world and mine come closest. I paused. He wrote about mate bonds. Calum went absolutely still. He said a willing conduit changes everything, I continued. He said that a mate bond, with consent from both people, can function as a full bridge. Not just mind to mind. Body to world. A crossing, he said. His voice was different now, stripped of its careful control, raw with something enormous. He said it has to be chosen, I said, both sides. The one crossing and the one allowing it, freely, without coercion. I looked at the photograph. At the mother who had loved her family knowing what it cost. I'm choosing, Lena. I'm not finished. I turned away from the photograph and sat up straight. If we do this, we do it with rules. You ask me every time. I say yes every time, freely, or it doesn't happen. You tell me everything, about your world, about Dorian Vale, about what comes after. No more secrets. No more deciding what I can handle. I met the air in front of me the way I'd gotten used to meeting him, directly, like he was physically present. And when you cross over, you don't hide in me. We find a way to get you your own body, your own presence, your own life in this world. You are not a guest in my skin. You are a person. Silence, the long-waited kind that meant he was feeling something too large for immediate words. You would do this, he said at last, not a question, an act of comprehension. Like a man seeing something he'd stopped believing in, after what I did, after what I kept from. You would still. I would do this because of what you are, I said. Not despite it. You protected me for months before I knew you existed. You held yourself together in a place designed to unmake you because the bond gave you something to hold. You told me the truth when it would have been easier to keep lying. I exhaled slowly. And you cried over bark, Calum. You cried because you got to touch a tree. A sound from him that was almost a laugh. Almost. Underneath it was something much older and much rawer. I am yours, he said. Completely. In whatever form that takes. Then let's bring you home, I said. Part 5. The Crossing Marsh's dissertation outlined the requirements with the precision of a man who had spent 30 years being dismissed by colleagues, and had compensated by making his methodology airtight. A willing conduit. Consent explicitly spoken aloud. A thin place. Marsh had mapped 3 in the city. The closest was in Hallett Park, 20 feet from the exact spot where I'd stopped walking the night of the cyclist. The universe apparently had a sense of symmetry. A full moon. Not symbolic, Marsh insisted in a footnote that read slightly defensive. The gravitational effect on the between place was measurable and significant. And the bond itself open as wide as it could go. Both people fully present. Fully chosen. I stood in Hallett Park on a Thursday night in February under a sky so clear and cold the stars looked sharp enough to cut. The full moon was enormous above the oak trees, turning the frost on the grass to scattered silver. My coat was on, my mother's photograph in the inner pocket against my chest. I had told no one. What would I say? I stood on the frost-covered path and said, Calum, I'm here. I know. His voice was different tonight, closer than it had ever been, and tighter. The way a voice sounds when the body it belongs to is under enormous strain. I can feel the thin place. It's Lena, it's right there. I've been standing next to it for 3 years without being able to touch it. Then touch it, I said. I need you to say it, he said. The consent out loud. Marsh was right about that part. The thin place responds to intention. It needs to hear it. I looked up at the moon. At the silver oak trees. At the park where a cyclist had nearly killed me 5 months ago, and a voice had said stop walking and everything had changed. Calum, I said clearly, into the cold night air. I know what you are. I know what this is. I know what it costs and I know what comes after. I pressed my hand flat against my chest, over my mother's photograph, over the warmth that had lived there since October. Come home. The world didn't explode. There was no flash of light, no sound like thunder. What happened was quieter and stranger and far more real than any of that. The warmth in my chest moved. It traveled outward, through my ribs, my arms, my hands, spreading to my fingertips, and then it left me. Not taken. Released. The way you let go of a breath you've been holding so long you forgot you were holding it. The cold air in front of me changed. It began with the hands. They appeared the way frost appears on glass, not all at once, but building from nothing into something, detail by detail, until they were fully present. Strong hands, scarred across the knuckles, the crescent moon scar on the left hand exactly as I'd seen it in the visions. Then wrists for arms. The rest of him assembling himself from the cold air and the moonlight and 3 years of held-together determination. Until he was standing 6 feet away from me on the frost-covered path in Hallett Park. Solid and present and real. He was taller than I'd imagined. Dark-haired, pale from 3 years in the between place, wearing clothes from his world that looked slightly wrong in mine, leather and dark fabric, practical and worn. His eyes, when they found mine, were the color of deep water. He looked at his own hands first, turned them over, pressed his palms together slowly, feeling the pressure, the warmth, the reality of contact. His expression did something complicated and private that I looked away from because it felt too intimate to witness. Then he looked at me. Neither of us moved for a long moment. "Hi," I said finally. My voice came out smaller than I intended. "Hi," he said out loud. With his actual voice, his real voice, present in the physical world for the first time, and it was the same voice I'd heard in my head for 5 months, exactly, but also completely different because now it had air in it, breath, the resonance of a chest and a throat and a living body. He took one step toward me, stopped. Held out his hand, palm up, open, waiting. Not grabbing. Not claiming, asking. I looked at his hand. At the crescent moon scar. At the frost on the grass around his feet, already beginning to melt from the warmth he was putting out. Real warmth, physical warmth, the warmth of a body that had been cold for too long and was finally somewhere it was allowed to exist. I put my hand in his. His fingers closed around mine, carefully, like someone handling something valuable, and he made a sound that was not quite a word, that would never have a word, that was simply the sound of 3 years of dissolution meeting its end. We stood in the park under the full moon and said nothing for a long time. The city moved around us, cabs and cold and distant sirens, people who had no idea. The oak trees dropped the last of their frost in slow, spiraling descent. "Dorian Vale," I said eventually. "You said he took your territory." "Your people, yes." His voice was still adjusting to the physical world, slightly rough, like something that had been stored a long time and needed use. "Then we deal with him," I said. "Whatever that takes. Whatever your world needs." He looked at me. "That isn't your fight. You became real in my world," I said. "That makes it mine." I squeezed his hand once besides. "I'm an archivist. I know how to find things that have been buried. How to reconstruct what was taken apart." I met his eyes. "I'm very good at it." Something moved across his face. Not just gratitude, something deeper, more settled. Recognition, maybe. The particular recognition of seeing someone clearly for the first time and finding that they are exactly what you suspected they were. "Lena Calloway," he said slowly. "Like cataloging something. Junior archivist. Keeps her mother's photograph in her coat pocket. Alphabetizes books by emotion." His thumb moved across my knuckles, gentle and deliberate. "The bravest kind of love. The kind that knows what it costs." I thought of the matriarch in the photograph. Her preemptive grief. Her decision to love her family anyway, in full knowledge of impermanence. "That's not bravery," I said. "That's just what you do when something is real." He brought my hand up slowly and pressed his mouth against my knuckles. Warm lips, real and present. The single most ordinary thing that had ever happened to me, and the most extraordinary. "Thank you," he said against my hand, "for hearing me, for choosing this, for..." He stopped. Started again. "For not letting me stay lost." I looked at him in the moonlight. This man who had spent 3 years coming apart in the space between worlds. Holding himself together by the thread of a bond to a woman cataloging forgotten things in a climate-controlled basement. Who had walked through my city and my body just to feel bark under his hands. Who had said eat something at 2 in the morning, because he knew I'd forgotten and he couldn't not. "I cataloged lost things for 5 years," I said. "I was very good at it. But I never managed to bring any of them back." I turned his hand over in mine. Pressed my palm flat against his, warmth to warmth, real to real. "I think I like this better," I said. He smiled. And it was the first time I'd seen it, his actual face, his actual expression, and it was nothing like I'd imagined and exactly right, and the warmth that flooded through me this time was both of ours at once, indistinguishable, the bond finally, fully closed. Above us, the moon was enormous and ordinary. Around us, the city continued, indifferent. The frost on the grass kept melting. The oak trees stood their ground. And in Hallett Park, on a Thursday night in February, a man who had been lost between worlds stood on solid ground and held the hand of the woman who had chosen to call him home. Nothing dramatic. Nothing loud, just two people, just real, just this.